Good morning. Today on the Brew, we are going to tackle China's economic growth in 2024 with Paulina and Molly. So stay tuned for that opening bell. Good morning. Hi, 2024 people. What the heck? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Right? Good. So we made it alive. I can see we're still moving. That's good.
I know. I arrived late for the world to know. I came in like a shoulder roll coming in hot.
Yeah, that's right.
I made it.
Paulina, how'd you do? You managed okay?
I did pretty well, thankfully. I made it back home from Philadelphia, so all good here.
Oh, good. Okay, back in NYC somewhere, right?
Yeah, somewhere in New York.
All right, good, awesome. So let's get right to it. I know we're busy and we have to move along, but let's get right to it. So China, economic growth in 2024. First of all, can we kind of talk about 2023 just broadly? Was it as good as they thought, or was it supposed to be a boom, but I don't think it really was. Was it, Paulina?
There were really high expectations for Chinese economic growth in 2023. COVID obviously had a huge drag on the economy for 3 years. The government put really strict lockdowns for all the people there. But there were really high expectations that in a post-COVID environment, China's economy would boom from the pent-up consumer demand. But fast forward to 2023, consumer health wasn't as strong as expected. And that's because income growth was small, households were struggling, unemployment was and still is high. On top of that, remember the Chinese property sector? Well, that's still in shambles. So by the middle of the year, by the middle of 2023, it was pretty evident that there was a slowdown in the Chinese economy, and that didn't show signs of accelerating. So in response, you had Chinese policymakers come in to try to stimulate the economy by lowering interest rates, which was funny because in the US, we were doing the opposite, increasing rates. But Chinese economy grew at a 5.2% pace for the first 3 quarters of the year, and showed signs of improvement in November when looking at the government data. So there were high expectations, but in reality, it was a bust.
A bust, a flat out bust. Well, if that's not taking all the little loop-de-loops out of the party, I don't know what is. Right? Oh man. Okay. Well, having said that, do we have any greater expectations for 2024, or do we feel a similar bust? What do you think?
All right. So what's expected in 2024? Well, looking at some data, so the World Bank came out with a forecast of 5.2% annual growth in 2023. We're still, waiting for those numbers to officially come out. But in 2024, they said that the economy in China is going to grow 4.5%, and then which is obviously less than the expected growth for 2023, in that in 2025, that growth should even be lower at 4.3%. So looking out, throughout 2024 and even beyond that, it looks like growth is going to be steadily on the decline. But actually earlier this week, we got some data from Macau, and obviously, that's not representative of China. Macau is a smaller gaming hub. It's a Chinese administrative region where a lot of the casino operators are. And there was some positive data coming out of Macau. The local government came out and said the gross gaming revenue, which comes out on a monthly basis, was really positive for December. And that shows that there is activity from some Chinese consumers. But it's important to differentiate the Macau visitors versus the average Chinese consumer. The average Chinese consumer is more, very careful as to where they're spending their money versus A Macau visitor is kind of like the high-end VIP visitor who has more bandwidth to spend on their money. So overall, it looks like throughout the next few years, growth in China may be slower ahead.
All right, from all that stuff, what's the question? Is the question what is the question?
Well, so there are obviously some challenges not only in for the Chinese economy, not only in 2024, but actually major fundamental challenges within the Chinese economy. First and foremost, it's about demographics. And there's a low fertility rate in China. The life expectancy is growing, and that combination is really not a good one. There's also a talent gap. So to address that issue, Chinese companies, they're working with vocational schools. They're trying to push students into blue collar careers. So, these slower population trends and these difficult demographic trends, they're really not good for the government. They're not good for business and society. So that's something that they need to overcome. Although I still think that there are some tailwinds for the Chinese economy in 2024. First and foremost, China, they have really strong areas in their economic output. So think of exports of machinery, phones, cars. One particular bright spot is the electric vehicle sector. So China is the world's largest EV market, and there are many domestic EV brands that make up over 80% of China's entire EV market. So there's a lot of competition there, and that's a sector that's booming.
Yeah.
So stop.
Would we we're a net importer versus exporter to them, right? So by a landslide, is that accurate? We import more stuff from them than we send to them.
Yeah.
Okay. So
I think exports are falling though on that record. I think
they are.
Yeah.
Even more because of their headwinds that they've already faced, right?
What do you see over there, Paulina, on exports?
Yeah, I also heard that exports are falling. Although we do still get a majority of our goods from there. So and then the property sector is also a huge issue. They keep on building infrastructure, roads that are not being used, and that's a tactic that the government has been using for years in order to increase GDP, but that seems like it's catching up to it. So yeah, I think there's a lot of fundamental issues here, but if they want to try to turn it around, I think they're going to focus on technology and growth, and transforming their industries with technology. So they might try to innovate things and automate things through robotics. China actually has an industrial robot market, and it's the largest in the world.
Wow.
So they use this technology in factories when they're making cars or electronics. So when we talk about digital transformation, think of artificial intelligence. So I think China's going to be is going to be using something along those lines in order to make things more efficient and maybe try to cut down on labor costs and things associated with that.
Okay.
I think it's probably good to think of, there's probably an inverse relationship between artificial intelligence and blockchain technology on a decentralized ledger. So the decentralization makes it a lot harder for of government oversight to come in and control, where artificial intelligence is often used to facilitate that. And being a Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, they really are really pushing that. And so this is just me looking at things, and we see these empty fields of buildings because their MO has been build infrastructure, because it used to be $4 of infrastructure per $1 income. Now it's all the way up to $12 on build for the infrastructure for, you know, $1 return on that. And you just see these empty buildings, and I'm wondering, is this going to be like a Blade Runner future? Are they going to be housing their AI that they're building? And will this probably be the epicenter, which, you know, then I go to, there's a lot of regulation on the table across the world to figure out how do we handle artificial intelligence? How do we symbiotically move forward with it? And I imagine geopolitics will have there'll probably be a lot of borders where AI is allowed, AI, you know, is mitigated to some extent. So it'll be interesting to see how China plays out in that.
Are they big players in the AI space? I mean, I would think from their
They are.
technological sort of, you know,
And they're huge. Yeah, they're big players in the quantum computing, which then makes you question, why is the IMF still labeling them as an emerging developing market when they have some of the biggest tech in, you know, and I know that's GDP and there's some calculations there, but really when you stand back and look at it, should they be getting these advantageous interest rates I'm confused. I could be clueless.
That's a CT part. That's a good CT scan, just so we're clear. I like it. I like
Right.
it. So, Paulina, I would say then that you're not overly optimistic about 2024 for China. I mean, it doesn't sound like you're in the dumps about it either, right? Sort of lukewarmy.
Yeah, I would say it's kind of in the middle. I think that we're not really sure 100%. I think once we get some economic data coming out of the country, we'll have a better idea of how to shape our perspective for 2024. But and we'll not only get that from economic data, but also from earnings reports from U.S. companies that do business abroad. I think different areas might perform differently. So retail might remain pressured because consumers are probably going to be cautious around spending, especially on some high-end discretionary purchases. But maybe companies that sell low-cost merchandise may fare better. For example, as we mentioned, the gaming industry has been doing particularly well ever since the lockdown stopped and tourists started to come in. So I think that will continue that trend. So it's to be determined, but I think it might be in the middle.
Right.
And you brought up a really good point. You uncovered some data last show saying that moving away from, you know, they're moving towards experience versus buying stuff. So that might hinder their export that they count on from us as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And hitting on that in relation to Macau, casinos in that area, as I said, they've been performing really well. And these casinos, they have restaurants, they have shows, which feeds into the experiences. And I know we talked about that last week. Consumers are prioritizing these, allocating their money towards experiences. So I would say that industries within the Chinese economy that will do well will focus on experiences.
So, you know what's confusing to me, and Pauline, I don't expect you to have an answer for this, but I'm just going to say this. What's confusing to me is that, you know, deep down, China is considered a communist country, right? More or less. So, under that sort of development or system, there's not a lot of freedom for any kind of market economy, is there? So how much of it is more or less pushed forward by what the government wants us to hear? You know, that kind of scares me a little bit when we talk about free market and how we deal with imports, exports, and everything else in between. So maybe I'm wrong about that, because there's certainly a developing class of Chinese who seem like they have means and wealth. So I don't know if it's the Communist Manifesto of, there's a ruling class and there's everyone else, the proletariat or whatever you want to call them. Is there something in between that I'm missing on this one? I don't know if I'm getting this right, because I'm suspicious of communism when it comes to markets, I suppose. Can I say that, Molly? Could you just bleep that out? Can I say that?
Yes.
I can say that? Okay.
Yeah, you can say that.
All right. Sorry, Paulina. I told you, I don't expect you to have an answer on this one. I'm venting, sort of.
Yeah, I see your point. There is a huge disparity in the uh, in wealth. Obviously, there's the super wealthy versus the middle to even lower
Yeah.
class, and so it seems like that's catching up with the Chinese economy because the consumption, which is a huge part of any economy's GDP, has been really low in 2023, and it's expected that Chinese consumers may not consume, may not spend
Mhm.
at the same pace as they used to because their income is not growing. And it sounds similar to kind of what's happening in the US. I'm not sure what the root causes of those are.
Mhm.
I'm sure it goes back to COVID, but it definitely is more difficult for a lower income consumer to spend
Mhm.
versus a high income consumer in the Chinese class.
Yeah.
So that's a huge part of it.
Yeah. Okay.
And this is so weird. I didn't even know what this was, but the Universal Postage Union. I mean, has anyone heard of that? That is actually an international, oversight that determines the price of postage for each country. And so again, China's getting preferential treatment there. So if Alibaba ships something, it's a discount versus if we ship something out. So if they export their postage price, I mean, there's all sorts of these pervasive things that are happening, including Panama, that we need to, that's a huge port. And I think, they're trying to establish their place down there in a huge way. So it's really important to keep an eye on Panama and what's happening in those
Mhm.
areas.
You're calling. I think you're calling bullshit on that postage thing, aren't you?
Oh, right. Sounds like it, but no,
Yeah.
that is real.
Okay. I believe it.
But yeah,
Alright.
so what do you think about Paulina? Should we stand back and reassess China's international preferential treatment, or do we want to support, are they an emerging market, and how do we feel on a fundamental trade, and where are the vote, if our dollar is a vote, supporting it, and this is probably this, I don't want to set you up here, so don't answer this part, but like Lex was saying, supporting a communist
Well,
country that doesn't allow a lot of competition. If
before
it's
Paulina answers that or gives her opinion on it, you know, the whole difficulty here for me, at least, is you weave in this communist country with a major economic as a major economic power,
yeah,
right? So now all of a sudden, the relationship between the U.S. and China, it's a significant factor, I would think, right? I mean, it has huge repercussions for our economy and theirs, how we deal with each other. It seems like, right? Whether we like it or not. And I don't personally don't like it. I don't like dealing with the communism part. But it is what it is. We're forced to in some respects. So I'm not sure down the road what we can do anyway, because we still have they import so much stuff, especially on the electronic side of the world, the technology side of the world, that we got to deal with them. Period. Right? I don't know.
Paulina, what do you
You just Polly just wants to go. I think she just like
No, 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 she did, no. She's a better listener.
No,
She's a better
I have so many interesting thoughts that you guys have prompted on the emerging market side. I think, and I'm not sure about this, but their claim, the IMF's claim, or whoever establishes that, probably classifies China as an emerging market because of the fact that their population is a majority of their population is considered lower class. So as more people go into the middle class, which seems increasingly difficult given the circumstances, I think that's when an economy is considered less emerging and more developing or advanced.
But
But
that's really interesting because communism in history, we have a huge track record of how communism performs. That tends to be the repercussion that there's a disappearing middle class, and the Politburo controls the struggling lower classes. And so if internationally we give preferential treatment to that versus rewarding capitalism, then I think that would be a better world. But if you talk to people who actually live in China, the younger generations they actually have business ideas, and they're entrepreneurs, and they're not into the communist part. So but the Communist Party has so much control that they're hindering that growth. So as long as that is in place, I don't see it improving. I just see we're probably supporting something, that gap to just expand. I don't know what's your thought?
Yeah, so I'll take a different perspective of
Please.
China's presence abroad. It has a very strong international presence with its investments in areas like Africa and Latin America. And I think, taking it a step further, that also, puts into question its position in BRICS. I know that has been a huge, I think it started in the early 2000s, the formation of BRICS, along with, Brazil, Russia, and India. And I think there's even more countries trying to apply in BRICS, and how that, formation of economies could create maybe, another currency or what have you, so they can start doing business with each other. So these are big players, and they're non-European and Western players. So it kind of sounds like the formation of a new World Bank or IMF, but in these new age economies. So I don't know what that is and what that means, but it's something that I've been reading about and taking note of.
That's a really good point. I mean, I think, a lot of these wars are currently happening, but the real thing to keep an eye on is these banking systems and how they're changing. LIBOR is being cycled out. We have Enbridge happening, which is going around the IMF and around the SWIFT system. And then BRICS, as you say, they're promoting, a digital coin, and, everyone into Bitcoin is like, that's great. But what they don't tell you is that it's not on a decentralized ledger. They might say it's decentralized, but it's really, like these two guys are watching, they're holding the ledger. But a true decentralized ledger is across everyone who's involved. So that's the really important stuff to be looking at right now, and not to be distracted by what that big box on your wall might be telling you. Otherwise, really, and how do people keep an eye on it? If we all have finance backgrounds, so I think it's really important to educate what is money, what does the IMF do compared to the Bank of International Settlements? What's the difference there? And a lot of us are just new to all this, but I think it's a lot easier than it sounds complicated, but once you just piecemeal it and you learn a little bit here and there, you can take a grasp, and then your eyes open wide, and you know where to look when you zoom out.
Yeah. Okay. Coolio. I'm not making a trade in a Chinese ETF.
Okay.
Just saying it.
Yeah.
I think Paulina and I agree. We're kind of lukewarm. It's like my porridge, not too hot, not too cold.
I think if you study certain sectors and you know that there's going to be some sort of growth, then you can look into it, but you have to be strategic about it. You have to know when to buy, when to pair your losses, if there are any. I think in general nowadays, especially in a difficult market like China, you have to have a strategy, and you have to be disciplined in executing that strategy. You can't just be like, oh, I'm investing in this ETF or stuff,
Yeah, no, I agree with that. That's a good point.
About it.
Cool. All right, Paulina, thanks for coming on. See you next week. You have a great weekend. Great to see you in 2024. I hope it's a happy new year and a prosperous one. So looking forward to it. Have a great weekend.
You too.
Thanks, Paulina.
Bye, Paulina.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Molly, it's just you and me again.
I know, it's China. That is a really.
I gotta be honest. You know, the China part. I don't know much about the China part. So I needed you guys' help there.
I think it's intentional. I think, it's not like this is a new tactic, but we
Right.
need to make sure that we understand that some of the shows and movies we watch in the news that's fed to us is it's bias, and we need to make up our own decisions, and that only comes from really great education, which you can find here on the Tradier Hub. We have these great the hosts here on Tradier Hub, and I'm not just saying it, like I feel really lucky to be a part of this, is that they really know their stuff. And so to get educated, just turn it on and get saturated, and all of a sudden you start to pick stuff up. That's
a good
really
point.
important.
I was doing a Tradier Hub myself today. I was fishing around, looking at different parts of the content. I think it was really kind of neat. And just so folks know, it's being revamped. So, we made a pass 1 at it. This is, let's call it pass 2 for lack of a better number. But we're going to keep improving on it and making it more user friendly. And we love your suggestions. So make sure you send us those.
And Tradier Hub's a startup. So voice, say, hey, I'd love this feature, and we'll get it in there. We'll build it. It'll be a community effort, and we can all learn together.
I love it. All right, Ma. Well, we've gone long today.
I know.
Right?
I know. I try to control myself. I'm like, this time I'm not gonna blab my mouth, but then I go. I can't help myself.
I'm glad you did today, because I'm having like a 2024 coma right now. Okay, I will see you next week.
All right.
The Wednesday show.
Okay. Thanks, Lex.
I don't know what we're gonna call it yet, but it's the Wednesday. All right. I'm hitting the bell.
Thanks, Lex.
Bye.
Bye.